First up, Holy Water. Priest rare, 5 mana spell, deal 4 damage to a minion. If that kills it, add a copy of it to your hand. Dealing 4 damage to a minion is typically worth a 3 mana card, a relatively poor 3 mana card. The question for this card is therefore, is getting a copy of the target minion worth the 2 extra mana costs? The answer? Yes. While there are some restrictions as to when exactly you'll be able to obtain the target card, in general you'll be able to snag a card of your choosing. This makes it about on par with the Discover effect. So this card is perfectly balanced, meaning it's likely fun for the arena. In Constructed, it's hard to say, but perhaps this will find a home in a control deck requiring more anti-tempo and flexibility. Secondly, Rat Trap. Hunter Epic, 2 mana spell, secret, after your opponent plays 3 cards in a turn, summon a 6/6 rat. Serious question, what kind of rat is twice as big as a bear? When judging a secret, you need to ask 2 questions. What are the odds that it's activated, and when it gets activated, how strong is it? Take Ice Barrier for example, very likely to get activated, and exactly 8 health strong. Rat Trap is a case of being very strong when it's activated, but the odds of it being activated are quite slim in most matchups. Even aggressive decks can avoid playing 3 cards at once if they have to. However, this card is important for one main reason. It's a tech card, specifically designed to beat a particular archetype. If Miracle Rogue takes off, for example, this card is guaranteed to surface as a counter to it. Outside of countering those specific instances though, this card is always going to be lacking. An intelligent player will test for all the other secrets and avoid playing 3 cards at a time until they can deal with the rat, or beat you. Third, Spectral Cutlass. Rogue Epic, 4 mana 2/2 weapon, lifesteal. Whenever you play a card from another class, gain +1 durability. Compare to True Silver Champion and wow, those are poor stats. So the 2/2 weapon does not measure up, but what about the boosting durability? Does that assist? Well, yes and no. Let's assume you play 1 card from another class every turn, so this weapon basically has infinite durability. This equates to a 2 damage attack every turn, which is fine. However, if you factor in our assumption and that your opponent can destroy this weapon, then this weapon becomes less appealing. The positive side of a high durability weapon is being able to upgrade it, making great use of cards like Deadly Poison. Unfortunately, this puts Spectral Cutlass in the uncomfortable position of being a synergy bridge. You need both weapon upgrades and class stealing for this card to be worth it, which means that this card is only valuable in that one deck. These limits turn this card into something that is seriously lacking, but can be strong in certain circumstances. But then, it'd probably just get oozed, so this card will never be the strongest. Up next we have Bogshaper. Shaman Epic, 7 mana 4/8 elemental. Whenever you cast a spell, draw a minion from your deck. The first instinct is to compare this to Gadgets and Auctioneer, but that comparison doesn't quite work. The Auctioneer's strength is self-synergy under the circumstance of a cheap spell-heavy deck. A similar comparison can be made with Archmage Antonidas. One is self-synergizing, but the other is more durable. I harken back to the old days of Hearthstone where Antonidas was used for something other than 1-turn kill combos. Normally this card would be lacking because it's actually anti-synergistic. Either your deck has more spells and you would not get the chance to draw any minions, or it has more minions and you might not be able to cast spells while this is out. The problem is remedied with Hagatha and her support cards, which provide the spells without having to lower the minions in your deck. Echo cards also assist in this, allowing for multiple castings with just 1 spell. In the end, this card appears to be a synergy bridge between elementals and the Hagatha mechanic. Since the card is strong enough by itself, it avoids the shame that Spectral Cutlass got, but it still works best in one particular type of deck. Moving on, we have Blood Witch. Warlock rare, 4 mana 3/6, at the start of your turn deal 1 damage to your hero. This card is an example of what I like to call forced synergy. We see in the later cards what this effect is meant to activate. Blood Witch does nothing creative with this activation, it just does it. If there's a card that benefits, great, but nothing innovative comes from this card. That tied with only par stats makes it such that this card is pitiful on its own. Even in terms of the synergies it activates, its higher than desired cost limits how effective it is at activating those synergies. However, this card may seem boring on the surface, but it makes me wonder what other cards could be designed that benefits from this effect. With that in mind, I have a challenge for you. Design a card that synergizes strongly with Blood Witch. None of these if this then that synergies. I want cards that legitimately make me want to put Blood Witch in my deck over just using my hero power or Kobold Librarian. Here's an example card I came up with. Perhaps 0 mana is too cheap, but I think the limitation is fair enough. If you just life tap on your turn, this is the equivalent of a Wisp after all. But a Blood Witch would give this card 1/1 more stats from the start of the turn. Not bad. Send me your cards on Twitter, @PennilessPriest, #BloodWitchSynergy. I'm interested to see what you come up with. Anyways, back to the cards. We have Dustbat, Warlock Common, 3 mana 2/4 Beast. Battlecry, if your hero took damage this turn, summon 2 1/1 bats. This if clause is relatively straightforward for a Warlock to get, given Kobold Librarian, Vulgar Homunculus, and their hero power. This card's raw stats makes it seem fitting for Zoolock, a more aggressive deck, since more creative cards can't be used often in aggressive decks. However, the limitation of this card means that it can't be used on turn 3, which means that managing your curve is going to be a challenge. However, it's easy enough on the later turns to get this card going, given the Warlock hero power, and when activated it's basically a Grim Necromancer that costs 1 less mana. That's good enough to say that this card will be decent. I'm not going to rate it higher than that though. Strong enough for aggro, but too clunky for aggro to fall in love with. Up next, Deathweb Spider, Warlock Epic, 5 mana 4/6 Beast. Battlecry, if your hero took damage this turn, gain lifesteal. While acceptable without the if clause, this card is best viewed as if the if clause is required. In that circumstance, it's similar to Bloodworm, except with more health. That's not bad, except for one detail. The synergy creates a dead end. There's no way to build off of this card. A tempo or aggro or zoo deck has little use for lifesteal, and control would simply look for more potent cards with better combinations. That being said, this card is strong enough by itself that it will be good in Arena. I don't expect to see it outside of there though. Next up, Swift Messenger. Neutral common, 4 mana 2/6, Rush. Each turn this is in your hand, swap its attack and health. Now we're talking with these Worgen cards. Rush is typically better with high attack, so the preferred form for this card is when it's a 6/2. We wouldn't expect a card like that to survive, so it's basically a deal 6 damage to a minion card, which is fine. Meanwhile, the 2/6 version is nothing to scoff at. When facing many weak minions, this card can destroy one, then stay on the board for the next, kind of like Fireplume Phoenix. However, like all Worgen cards, this card has the weakness of only being able to be played half of the time. Let's say you need the 6 attack version to kill the opponent's minion. 50% chance you can do it, else you'll have to wait. While this card can deal with multiple circumstances, it can only deal with one of those circumstances at any given time. And since Hearthstone is all about timing, what's the difference? Still, the quality that both of these versions provide makes it good enough in Arena. Perhaps with the right synergies, a constructed deck will take it, but I'm not holding my breath. Moving on, Spellshifter. Neutral common, 2 mana 1/4, spell damage +1, Worgen shifting. Sorry Blizzard, but neither a 1/4 nor a 4/1 is going to cut it, even with spell damage. The key to spell damage is to either have it be tied to good tempo, or to put it in decks that don't need good tempo, like Freeze Mage. With that in mind, this card will suffice in certain burst damage decks, but we already have the pieces for that. Sure, technically you could play the 1/4 version and hope it sticks, but that's rarely going to be worth attempting. This is especially true in Arena, which has very little use for spell damage effects, so both these forms are not worth considering. Second to last, we have Gilnean Royal Guard. Neutral rare, 8 mana 3/8, Divine Shield, Rush, Worgen shifting. A very mixed bag with this one. To start off, the 3/8 version is never going to be worth your time. Divine Shield works well with low health and high attack, so the Worgen form is easily the superior one. Coupled with Rush's synergy for both Divine Shield and high attack, and you'd have a very strong removal tool. If it weren't for two things, the cost and the shifting status. 8 mana minions are already hard to play, while this card is meant to both react to opposing cards, and it can only be used half the time. So if your opponent plays the Lich King, an ideal target for this card, you only have a 50% chance that this card can even deal with it that turn. That said, an 8/3 Divine Shield Rush minion is decent. It's like King Crush with Rush instead of Charge. King Rush! Ha! Came up with that on the fly. But as much as I'd like to say that this card will be good for Arena, its flexibility limits are probably going to leave it lacking instead. Finally, we have Dire Frenzy. Hunter common, 4 mana spell, give a beast +3/+3, summon 3 copies into your deck with +3/+3. Let's compare this to King's Blessing. The beast tagline makes it a tad less flexible, but so long as it's in the correct deck, it shouldn't be an issue. So the question becomes, is 1/1 lessened stats worth getting 3 copies of the buffed minion in your deck? To that I say, I don't know. Giving this boost to a low cost beast is best, since a 1 mana 4/6 is better than a 6 mana 9/8. However, an aggressive deck would be unable to make something like that work, since they'd simply be praying to draw their more powerful minions. So this card requires the means to get those minions out in a timely fashion. Cards specifically meant to draw beasts or 1-drops would work decently for this purpose, enabling this card to make the most of its effect. Okay, I'm gonna have to stop there. For a moment, I was starting to think that Carnassa Hunter would actually work.